Hey everyone, if we're meeting for the first time, my name is Paul Vojchehoske and welcome to the Real Estate Classroom YouTube channel. It's just a place where real estate professionals can get tools and tips to stay out of real estate jail. And hey, real quick, before we get started, if you would, click that little subscribe button, that little notification bell right next to the subscribe button, and then if you would, give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Either way, I really don't care because it's all traffic to my channel. Topic of today. Are listing brokers required to disclose the listing commission to cooperating broker agents? And the answer comes from the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, Standard of Practice 3.4. So we're going to take a look at Standard of Practice 3.4 and see what it says. So let's take a look at Standard of Practice 3.4. It says, and we're going to break this down a little bit here. It says, realtors acting as listing brokers have an affirmative obligation to disclose the existence of dual or variable rate commission arrangements. Now, real quick, a dual arrangement is if there are two different types of commissions or rates of commission. So let's say that the listing agent lists the property at 6%, but the buyer or the seller reserves the right that if they procure their own buyer, then the listing commission is only 3%. All right, so let's move on. It says, i.e. listings where one amount of the commission is payable if the listing broker's firm is the procuring cause of the sale, and a different amount of commission is payable if the sale results through the efforts of the seller or a cooperating broker. It goes on to say the listing broker shall, that means they must, it's not an option, they shall, as soon as practical, disclose the existence of such arrangements to any potential cooperating broker and shall. Hold on, let's stop right there. What that sentence says right there is they must make the disclosure of a dual or a variable rate commission listing agreement. Now the good thing is most MLSs make it a requirement that the listing agents are required to make this disclosure in the MLS so cooperating brokers can see it. But if you're operating in a part of the country that doesn't have an MLS, then you would have to make that disclosure as soon as possible to any cooperating brokers. All right, let's look at the rest of this. It says, in response, and notice I have that in red. That means it's a trigger. In response to inquiries from cooperating brokers, disclose the differential that would result in a cooperative transaction or in the sale that results through the efforts of the seller. We're going to talk about this a little bit more. If the cooperating broker is a buyer representative, then the buyer representative must disclose such information to their client before they make an offer to purchase or lease. That basically says that buyer's agents must make a disclosure that it is, in fact, a variable rate commission. All right, now that we've covered the actual language of SOP 3.4, let me give you an example that everyone can understand here. So let's take a look at the board here. We have a scenario where there's 3 offers in on this listing agent's property. And as a buyer's agent, we looked in the MLS and we noticed that it was in fact a variable rate commission. Or maybe the listing agent made the proper disclosure. Well, here's an example of what we're talking about. The variable rate commission was as follows. If the listing agent procures the buyer, they pay a 5% commission to the seller pays a 5% commission. If another agent within that listing agent's brokerage firm procures the buyer, then the seller must pay a 6% commission. And if it's an outside cooperating broker, then the seller must pay a 7% commission. So in our example here, the seller is setting on 3 offers. Now let's look at the differentials here. Just for simple math purposes, we kept all the offers at $200,000. But look at how much difference in commission the seller has to pay with each one of these offers here. Obviously, with the listing agent, they're going to pay $10,000. If the in-house buyer's contract is accepted, well then it's a $12,000 commission to the seller, and that means that the buyer's offer is already $2,000 behind the listing agent who procured the buyer. Now look at the cooperating agent over there, an outside cooperating agent. It would require the seller to pay 7%, and the differential is $4,000. So that means that outside cooperating broker, their client is already $4,000 behind because of how the seller's commission rate is designed and set up. So what does the code say? Well, number one is as a buyer's agent. So let's say that I'm the cooperating buyer agent, and obviously my client is $4,000 behind the curveball already. I have an obligation, and if you go back to what we talked about previously, it says in response to. So that means I'm the buyer's agent. I'm going to ask the listing agent, how far behind, based on the contracts that you have, is my client behind? So the listing agent would be required under the code to tell me that based on the offer so far, your client is $4,000 behind. So therefore, I'm required again under SOP 3.4 to go to my client and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, based on the 3 offers that the listing agent has, and based on that variable rate commission that they have, if you really want to compete, we're going to have to start already with a $4,000. We're already at a $4,000 disadvantage based on that. I know it's an uncomfortable conversation that we have with our clients, but it is one that we must. And under the code, we're obligated to do that. So that's what we mean by a variable commission rate. So let's break down SOP 3.4, just in a bullet point fashion here. Number one, listing brokers must disclose the existence of a variable rate or a dual rate commission listing agreement. There is no trigger for this disclosure. That means they must make that disclosure either through the MLS, and if there's no MLS, then they must make that disclosure at some point prior to me submitting an offer as a buyer's or a cooperating agent. The code says as soon as practical. Number two, if asked. Now this is a trigger. If asked, the buyer's agent or that cooperating broker, buyer's broker, they have to ask the listing agent to find out what the differential is if they know it is a variable rate commission. And if asked, the listing agent must comply with that request. And number three is a buyer's agent must basically disclose to their client that a variable rate commission exists. And the buyer has a right to know what that differential is. Now this question comes up all the time. Now what happens if the listing agent, upon that request, fails to comply? Well, here's what I would tell you and how to handle this. Number one, remind the listing agent of their obligation under this standard of practice. If they still refuse, then have a conversation with their designated broker. If the designated broker refuses, then you have the option at some point to file an ethics complaint against both the agent and the broker for failing to comply with this standard of practice. Now, real quickly here, just so you know, this applies to NAR, a National Association of Realtor members. So the listing agent in this case, if you're a member, you must comply even if that cooperating broker is a non-member. So keep that in mind, it's very important. That's all I got for this video. If you would, real quickly, make sure you subscribe, give this video a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Click that little notification bell. Please share this with others, and please make comments down below. I'm sure I missed something. If I did, ask questions. I'll return with an answer. Until next time, get out there and sell something.